Can I get a sound check from your end?
Test, test, 1, 2.
Check, check.
Perfect,
Yes,
thank
can you hear me
you.
okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Sorry, I had to get back over to the screen. Thanks.
All right, everyone, we're live.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I want to announce that due to COVID-19, we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is participating knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and his current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. I'd ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor Alvey. Good evening. You are hereby notified that I've called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas, to be conducted virtually on Thursday, September 2nd, 2021 at 5 p.m. for a budget workshop. Roll call. Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Burrough.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Burrough. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Alvey.
Here. All right, tonight we have a budget workshop. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bach.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the commission. This is our sixth workshop in the overall program. I will run through our agenda for this evening. Go to the next slide. So our first is a presentation from our county sheriff, Mr. Ash. He will be here this evening. Commissioners had requested to discuss mill levy pilot change implications of that. And part of the presentation we've sent out this afternoon, we will walk through the different scenarios that are built into that program, which are put out there as food for thought for you all to then work with and go through your discussion. And those are the two formal items for this evening. And then we will talk about our budget calendar moving from this point forward. So with that, Mayor, I would turn this over to Sheriff Ash and let him offer his presentation to the commission. Sheriff?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bach. It's a little tricky figuring out how to unmute there. So good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for allowing me a few minutes to speak with you. Rocky's going to be my slide manager here, and I only have a few slides for you to look at. I come at you tonight from the overall standpoint of understanding that, we are more than 30 positions short. We've had four resignations this week alone from starting Saturday, moving through to today. And we didn't get any last night or today, so that was good. But that puts us short a little more than 30 deputies. But that said, that's not really why I'm here to talk to you about it. I just want you to keep that in mind as a backdrop, because what I'm about to present to you presents a dilemma on how we would actually accomplish it anyway. But it's a very serious situation that has been getting progressively more difficult over the last 4 or 5 years. And that is, I want to talk to you about our staffing, our authorized staffing level in our investigations unit. So next slide, Rocky, please. We have currently a captain who is the supervisor and commander over the investigations unit and does not necessarily investigate cases, although he has been pressed into service. Actually, he and his predecessors, two previous predecessors, both in assisting over this time period. But we have 4 full-time detectives or investigators that are assigned. They investigate cases that come from all of our law enforcement activities, whether that be in the field, specifically in the parks. It might come from our offender registration unit. It might come from judicial, and certainly anything on the magnitude of a criminal act that occurs in the detention center. So this is where they get their workload, if you will. In addition to working criminal cases from all of those, in all of those ways, they conduct all of the background investigations, the pre-employment and background investigations, and the CVSA exams for all Sheriff's Office employee applicants that are required to have those. And so some have different levels of them, but certainly everybody that's coming in into a sworn capacity, and people are coming in to work with sensitive criminal history record information like our records clerks, and even those now that are coming in to work our court security officer positions. We conduct extensive background checks on them to vet them out. And they also conduct our internal investigations of alleged employee misconduct, unless it is something that is incredibly high profile or demands an extra high level of accountability and transparency, within our community, within our criminal justice system, and certainly for the public. Those investigations, largely we have partnered with Kansas City, Kansas Police Department Internal Affairs to do those. And in some cases, we've gone out to other agencies such as Leavenworth County Sheriff, Johnson County Sheriff, and even the Kansas Bureau of Investigation on one real serious one. Next slide, Rocky. So here's just a little bit of an indication over the past 5 or 6 years of what some of that workload looks like in terms of the background investigations and the CVSAs that were completed. Now, some of those numbers have come down in 2019, 2017 in terms of the CVSAs. A lot of that was due to the fact that maybe applications were down. We didn't have as many background investigations that we were doing. Unfortunately, we are in one of those cycles right now. Since January, I only have now 5 applicants that have applied that are making it through the pre-employment screening process. Of the 5, there were 6. I had to remove 1 just this week based on some background information. But so of those 5 or 6, 2 have already been cleared for work and 3 are still in the background phase. So I don't even know if they're going to be acceptable. And remember, that's since January. So obviously we're not doing a whole lot of CVSAs and background investigations for deputy applicants. Next slide, Rocky, please. The other things that our investigators have to deal with is we do not have additional staff that manage our evidence room or our property room, nor do we have dedicated additional staff assigned to crime scene investigation. So for example, at the police department, they have a CSI unit. That's all those employees specialize in. And they have property room, evidence and logistics managers. That's all they deal with is maintaining and keeping, on occasion, releasing found property or confiscated property that is going to ultimately be released back to an owner somewhere, and certainly keeping track of all of their evidence from various crime scenes. Our detectives do all of that in addition to the investigations. And we have had, as you probably well know, increased major incidents at various parks in the last couple of years that include homicides, suicides, and other major death investigations. So for example, the body that was found at the Turner boat ramp, that investigation had to be worked as if it was a homicide. Now, just this week, the medical examiners ruled that it was a natural death, probably likely due to drug abuse in some form. And we did not discover any evidence that indicates that the victim died at that location. So more likely she died somewhere else. Somebody didn't want the police and the fire department and everybody else coming to their house for what should be probably obvious reasons to all of you. And so they took her body out and left it at the boat ramp. And then, of course, we had the unfortunate incident, Parkwood Pool. So we have handled all of those investigations. We have had homicides in Edwardsville Park, Eisenhower Park. Most recently, Matney Park. We had a major shooting at St. Margaret's Park. We had another alleged shooting at Kensington Park. And we had one at Caw Point Park that at the time, our investigative resources were overwhelmed and we could not work it. So the police department ended up managing that and handling that investigation that by all accounts, we were responsible for and should have done, but didn't have the capacity to do it. So I think that's the last slide. Is that right, Rocky? No, this is really the key slide here. So every year for the last 4 or 5 years, I've requested authorization for one additional detective, one additional investigator to help us with this workload. And this is why I want you to really draw your attention to a couple of things here. You will notice that since 2015, going forward, the number of cases we've worked in each year has been pretty much significantly higher. 2020 was a little bit of an outlier because of COVID, obviously. But what happened in 2015? Well, in 2015, we had 2 Kansas City, Kansas police officers murdered in the line of duty, and Chief Ziegler and his staff made the decision to go to 2-man cars versus the 1-man car. So they didn't have as many cars out on the street in any given 24-hour period answering calls for service. And it was the sheriff's office deputies that made up the difference in answering and responding to a lot of those calls for service. And a lot of those resulted in the necessity to have follow-up investigations, whether it was a robbery or a sex crime of some type or an aggravated shooting or cutting or even a homicide. And so the caseload went up that was, coming on to our detectives. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, you've got detectives, the police department's got detectives, that's the duplication of services. You're going to have to explain to me how that can be a duplication of a service if there's nobody at the police department able to respond to either the call or conduct a follow-up investigation, and we do it. And I don't care whether it's a call for service or an investigation or a traffic stop or anything else. The reason we're doing it is because there isn't another law enforcement officer there doing it. So I don't see it as a duplication of services whatsoever. But look at those numbers in the red, and we requested this data from KCKPD, and they graciously provided it to us in terms of the number of cases. You can see the disparity in the number of investigators. I'm not asking to get anywhere close to that, but look at the caseload. Look at the caseload and how it has increased, during these years. So we're falling behind. And the reason that's important is because we have victims and secondary victims that are oftentimes their justice is way delayed because we've got such a significant workload. So I put a budget in the budget request this year for just one additional investigator. And it's difficult to learn that the PD is getting 27 new positions authorized. And I'm sure they need every one of them. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. And even the parks, there's something in for parks for a park ranger. And we are supplying 2 deputies to the parks now. So I don't know if I'm going to need to come up with another deputy to, I'm not sure what that's all about. Nobody has had a conversation with me about that. So I don't know what's up with that. But I would really like to ask you all to seriously consider authorizing us for 1 more investigator. And I can't tell you right now when I would be able to actually promote the position, but the sooner I could do it, the better. And so that is the end of my presentation. I will stand for questions and then I'll let you get on to the remainder of your agenda.
Thank you, Sheriff Ash. That appreciate you bringing forward this data and presenting the problem clearly and in real terms. I would say clearly, I think you've demonstrated a need for this, and obviously the commitment of the Sheriff's Department to fulfill the duty of providing quick service for our people who are reaching out for law enforcement assistance. So thank you for bringing this forward. Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. I do support the sheriff's request. I have 2 questions. Number 1, I hope there's someone on the meeting tonight that can clarify for the sheriff the Parks Department request for I believe he said park ranger. And then secondly, the dollar amount associated with the position. And that's it.
Mayor, I can talk to you. This is Emerick Cross, Assistant County Administrator. With COVID last year in 20, there was a significant increase of use in our public parks of people using them. As you know, our fishing license permits went up 313%. And that request for the park ranger to work specifically in the parks, that's the reason it was made. Our parks are being used, which is a good thing, but at an unprecedented rate. And that was the driving force behind that, Commissioner.
Thank you, Emerick. Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually think he needs more than 1. I think he needs several more, in order to do the job safely and get things done in a timely manner. So I would support even more than 1. And as far as going up 300%, the use of the parks and stuff like that and the fishing licenses, I think we should take that excess money that we got from there and restock the lakes that are in Wyandotte County, because I don't know what we're doing with that money, but the lakes are being fished out and Wyandotte County Lake cannot be covered just on weekends. So they need the extra person out there to help make sure the lake is safe. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Bynum.
Sheriff, I wonder if you could answer my second question, the budget implication of the position you're requesting.
Yes, I should have that at my fingertips for you, Commissioner, and I don't. Reggie, I don't know if you recall what it is or what it was or not. I want to say this.
It's $109,000 with benefits.
Yeah, with the $30 pay, right. Okay, that I would not dispute that. I would say that that's very accurate.
Thank you.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Townsend. Good evening, Sheriff. I think Commissioner Bynum asked a couple of the questions that I wanted to put forward, but just for clarity's sake, you are talking about an increase in head count. There was something that you said near the end of your presentation that just tweaked a question in my mind. Are you talking about taking someone already on board and promoting them? Or you're talking about an increase in head count, which from these numbers seem to definitely support your request, but just for clarity's sake, could you address that?
Okay, thank you for the question, Commissioner. To be clear, we promote internally. So by the MOU, This is a promotable position under the provisions of the MOU with the union. So we were promoted deputy to investigator, but I'm currently only authorized for 4. So I'm asking for one authorization for one more FTE for 5, because I can't really afford to give up the deputy position either. But so yes, my specific request is one additional FTE at the level of investigator, detective. That would be an internal promotion for somebody from deputy to detective.
Okay, thank you. So you do need the body, and just appreciate what you have done with the workforce you have. This has been a particularly trying summer with regard to what's been needed in our parks. So thank you and your staff for that. Thank you.
Mr. Bach, I'm assuming that we're not actually vote on this, but you would want a sense of the commission, correct?
Correct, Mayor. I'm just getting a sense of the commission. So as we've done in previous years, we will build a yellow sheet as basically an amendment to bring back to the governing body on such an item. I mean.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am in support of the additional personnel. We just had a meeting yesterday with the CVB board, and we talked about public safety being an issue. The tourists in our community and those that visit our community need to know that they could feel safe. Anytime we have public safety presence and are able to address crime in a proactive manner and assist victims, I believe that there is a residual value, not only just to the wages, but to the perception of the community. So Sheriff Ash, thank you for the commitment and service to our community. And please let your rest of your officers and stuff know that we value and respect the work that they do under the most trying of times.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Commissioner.
Philbrook.
Okay, so we're talking about a park, okay, so we're talking about a park ranger. And who does that person respond to? Who's their immediate boss, Emmerich? And to what capacity is this person allowed to, well, in other words, are they going to be an officer of the law? You know, are they going to be under Sheriff Ash? You know, what's the story? Tell me a little bit more, Emmerich.
Well, what we were looking for, Commissioner, since we had that large increase, is having a park ranger that reports to the park director. And that would be an LEO person at this time. We have not worked out the finite details. What we're looking for is somebody who could, we're looking for a ranger that can work with our director and the assistant director out there who know where the large activities, the large group activities, where the rentals are taking place, so we can have somebody at large gatherings and group gatherings and things like that, and try to anticipate exactly where the crowds and where the need is going to be. That was what the final details we have not worked out with the sheriff. Of course, this has not been approved in the budget yet, but that was our plan after that.
So I'm still not sure if you mean that this person's going to be an officer of the law and carry a gun, okay, or if they're just going to be calling in the police or the sheriff if there's a problem.
Our intention at this time was to have it to be an LEO position.
What does that mean?
Law enforcement officer, I'm sorry.
Thank you. You know, acronyms, they kind of stink if you don't know them. Okay, sure. LEO, okay. And you guys were thinking that one person would be able to handle all of that?
No, you know, we have 54 parks. So the answer is no to that. But we would, you know, I would take 5 if you would give me 5, but we were just trying to be realistic and head in the right direction of
trying to get your foot in the door, huh?
Yeah, just trying to, there's a lot of activity going on, especially out at Wyandotte County Lake on the weekends. I think Commissioner Kane spoke to that earlier in this meeting or a previous meeting, but there's just a demand. And like I said, that goes back to COVID because everybody is outdoors now, and that's a good thing. that's a good thing, but we just want to make sure everything is safe and secure.
Okay,
Commissioner,
so I'm
Commissioner,
sorry,
if I
how
may.
much is it? How much is it per officer that you're looking at? You're looking at one, so what does that kick it up to? How much you're paying them? You
I
know,
think Kathleen Von Achen said $80,000 with salary and benefits for this position. Is that correct, Kathleen?
Correct.
okay. All right. I'd rather see two, but that's just me. I don't know how one's gonna be able to keep their head above water, and especially with those type of long hours and 7 days a week. But I'm at two on that. And I'm also with Sheriff Ash on the one. But Sheriff Ash, did you say then that you'll be pulling from your pool? Are you gonna be replacing that person that you're pulling from your general pool?
Well, yes, Commissioner, that's what I'm asking for is if you give the approval for the additional FTE as a detective, don't take the deputy pin away from me. We'll need to
Replace.
we need to backfill that. And I want to clarify that we already have two deputies assigned full-time to parks, one on the day shift and one on our night shift, our evening shift. So,
Okay. So I guess the question is then, are you opposed to having another person working in that area too, along with that, so they can cover more territory, Don?
no, I am not, no, I'm certainly not opposed to that. But once again, we've got to get them from somewhere. And
I
so
understand.
just if we get approval for that and you want us to do it, we can do it. As soon as I do it, I'm one more short in the detention center. And we're getting pretty critical. Unless we can get some applicants, and we get some people hired,
Right.
I don't see that coming very quickly.
No, I understand.
Just fall.
Sheriff Ash, I understand. Thank you for answering all those questions for me. Thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that I absolutely support this line. I support the personnel moves that the sheriff has proposed. The sheriff certainly has been involved in a lot of discussions with me lately about some of the challenges that we have in some of our parks with activities. And I'm just going to say now that as we look forward to next year's budget building for 2023, we really need to think about the size of the workforce versus the size of the job, the territory that they have to cover, the hours of the day that they have to cover that territory. So I absolutely support this. And I want to say now we need to really be very mindful of what a proper workforce would look like in 2023, given this increased use of our parks and given the increased challenges that we're facing in at least some of them. Thank you.
So, Mr. Bach, it was,
Thank you, Commissioner. I would just add, we've had some meetings about lowering. I don't know how much you've been briefed or what you know, but we still got to figure that out, probably for 2022 as well.
so, Mr. Bach, how would you want to get the sense of the commission?
Well, Mayor, I've probably heard a majority of commissioners offer their support for it during the course of this session tonight. If you want to take a straw poll, you could, or I believe I've heard the majority, like I said, of commissioners supporting this, and we should add this to our yellow sheet.
So let's go ahead and do a straw poll.
Okay.
Roll call, Mr. Deichler. Again, this is non-binding, simple straw poll sent to the commission. Mr.
Roll
Deichler.
call. Yes. Roll call. My mic's cutting out. Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Alvey,
Aye. Very good. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you all very much, and I'm available at your leisure to discuss any of these things. So, but thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right, move on to the next topic.
All right. So as we concluded our last meeting, or we had the request to come back and talk about where we are with the mill levy and the pilot that we currently charge with the Board of Public Utilities. And if we made some changes to this, what the implications would be. So I know the commission wouldn't have some discussions, but you also put this forward to us to be able to kind of walk through how this could work. Kathleen, if you'd hit the next slide. What Kathleen has put together in various scenarios tonight is to demonstrate what these implications will be. So if we were to move the property tax, mill rate, or the pilot, it lets you see some different scenarios. None of these are meant to be suggestions or recommendations coming from staff. This is in order for you to look at it. We can answer questions that you have and kind of work through it. So these are just out there as food for thought. I think she's done a good job with her staff of working through and kind of making a good analysis based on your request for what could happen. Really what all these scenarios do is look at the long term for where we're at with the commission or where we're at from our budget. So you have to take in the implications. One thing that I want to point out is the commission, just like you did, talking to Sheriff Ash, whenever we make decisions to spend money on additional staffing, that's a long-term implication. Any adjustment to the mill rate or the pilot is a long-term implication. The priorities that we've heard from commission also, you need to weigh against this mill rate adjustment or pilot change against investments in infrastructure or investments in our salaries for our staff, which is becoming more and more demanding of where we put this out. So we've tried to weigh in where we are on some of these things. If we assume, make certain assumptions that are in play. I'm going to just throw up to this next slide, which we saw the county one presented. So Kathleen and his team put this together just to show how we compare. And there's a couple of different good stats that are really brought out on this slide. As you can see on both, the top one is for the cities and the bottom one are for counties. And we tried to use very similar cities in our comparison as well as we did counties. It's ranked by the city property tax as a percentage of household income. So you can see we rank kind of in that middle category. You see there's several in the 80s, 90% is where we fall in play. But you'll note in the second to last column, the estimated median city property tax, we are the lowest. So if we were to rank it by this, based on where this goes to, and this was a chart that we modeled after what Johnson County did in their county, and then we just did it compared for our own city. So in fact, the bottom chart is, I believe, their chart. They're demonstrating, if you look at the county one, that as a percentage of household income, they have the lowest comparable. Again, we rank in the lower mid of that. But if you look at the estimated median county property tax paid, we are the lowest already. So a lot of these things come to play based on the fact that we have a lower household income than any of the other jurisdictions. So the amount of property tax total coming into pay is lower because the value of the households across the board are lower in looking at the services we have. But I found this to be a very interesting chart that Johnson County had put forward with their governing body and looking at it and seeing how we rank out when you look at tax dollars going to provide the services that we were charged with providing for all of our citizens. With that, I will turn this presentation over to Kathleen, and she's going to walk through the different scenarios or the different information she's put forth for this evening for you to look at, and then we'll let you all ask questions and discuss. Kathleen?
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Von Atchen, the Chief Financial Officer. And this slide here is a revisit of the same slide I presented last week. It provides us what is the baseline forecast growth assumptions. And so all of these assumptions are the same, except I did want to make one revision, which is that last week I said that the salaries had only been increased by 3% in 2023. But then in looking in the model, I realized it was for 23 and 24. So, just keep that in mind. That was in the baseline I presented last week. Just to revisit, the CPI is set for 2.2% through the next 3 years and 1.4 after that. And the mayor had suggested that is likely to go up because of the recent federal legislation and its influx of dollars into communities, which is also very likely. So we're presenting some scenarios around that topic. Everything else is the same. We are projecting roughly 6.5% growth in property tax, but the base property tax revenue is increasing by 5%. In our estimate, the extra 1.5% is due to expiring IRBs. So, still a conservative estimate. And again, the baseline includes a 4 to 5% of total expenditures for capital, cash capital and equipment, which previously it's always been around 2.5%. So the baseline forecast, again, this is the same chart as last week, where you can see that in the out year, even though COVID, the ARPA funding that we have deposited into the combined general fund is resulting from the ARPA revenue replacement, does show our fund balances at a higher level in 21 and 22, but then those balances drop back down to the right around the operating reserve target, which is 2 months of operating expenditures. And then it dips below that in years 24 through 27, and then comes back up in the outer years. So keep in mind that even though we have projected in the CMIP sheets, we have proposed increased level of cash and equipment beginning in 2023. That isn't near the amount that's actually necessary to maintain our roads and keep our streets at a pavement condition index that is the same as it has been in the past without it declining. So in order for that to happen, we need to invest 20 million more per year from the city general fund for road maintenance. So none of that 20 million more per year is included in here. I'm not going to go over this again. This is for your information. It's basically all the detail behind the baseline forecast. And these numbers are the same as they were presented last week. So now I'm going to go in and talk about the different what if scenarios. So in all these slides on the left is the baseline, which the baseline for whatever fund I'm referring to. And it's provided there as a comparison for the what if scenario, which is over on the right. So in this is, again, we're still talking about the combined general fund. And this slide shows that if both CPI and salaries are at 3% all the way to 2026, then you'll see that the fund balance grows from the baseline at the end of 2030 at 65 million to the end of 2026 at 56 million. And even though, it does cause additional costs if CPI goes up or is maintained at that 3% level, not only for operating costs, but personnel, but there's also a corresponding revenue increase because we earn greater interest, because if inflation goes up, then interest rates go up. So, layering in an increase of from 2 to 3% in salaries for 2025 and 26, because the baseline has 3% for 2024. It diminishes the fund balances in those years, but the fund balances recover to the 17% minimum target level beginning in 2029. Now I'm going to talk about the county, and we're presenting this pie chart and a listing of all the county departments, because oftentimes folks forget what services are provided by the county and the county general fund. The county general fund for 2022 total expenditures are proposed at $77 million. 43% of that is for the sheriff department. The next largest is a combination of the district court and district attorney's office together, comprising 11%, followed by dispatch for the police department at 7%, public works at 6%, the treasury and motor vehicle division at 5%, technology at 5%, appraisers at 3.8%, purchasing, dispatch for fire at 2%, and then it kind of goes down in terms of percentage from there. And you can see that there are a number of various state required departments that are included in the county general fund. Now, this doesn't include the levy funds, because we have the human services and developmentally disabled fund, and then we have the elections, and we have aging, and we have mental health. All those are separate levy funds that are not included here. So the baseline county general fund forecast, as you can see, it's doing all right. We've got it's below the 2-month operating target between 2022 through 2025, but then it really starts to, the balances start to really take off here. And that's partially due to the growth in the assessed value. And over time, it starts to accumulate. The out years are a product of just kind of keeping capital outlay at level at prior years without really growing it for inflation. So that's part of the cause for the increase in the out years, as well as increased costs, increased assessed value. So if we were to reduce the county general fund by 1 mil, then you'll see those balances in the near term dropping down far below the 2-month operating reserve level, but then it recovers in 2027. All right, and keep in mind this is the baseline where it does not include the increase in CPI or interest income. So it's still at the 2.2% level for 23 and 24, and then dropping to 1.4 after that. So this is all based on the lower CPI level. Now, if we were to, in looking at the general fund, here's the base, or the county general fund again, if we were to drop it by 2 mils in 2022, then you can see that would dramatically impact the operations of the county for such operations as the jail. Okay. So then we thought perhaps let's take a look at it. Yes, please.
Commissioner Philbrook.
Quick question. So on the, let's go. slide, please. Okay, so if we drop the 1 mil and it takes us down, you know, lower, definitely lower than 17%, we're talking 9, 5, 4 through that area, how much does it affect our bonding rates and issues like that and funding?
Well, so the credit rating analysts look at the entire county, the entire combined general fund. So it's the city and the parks and the county all together. So of course, all these fund balance add up to the roll up to the combined. And so it kind of depends on what's happening with the other two funds, right? But in general, the credit rating analysts really like it that we are at least at the 2-month operating reserve. In fact, they would prefer us to have a 3-month operating reserve, which is 25%, not 17%. So it would not be looked upon very well, favorably.
But it's all of those funds combined.
That's right.
Look
Yeah.
at. Okay. And
So that's,
go ahead. So if we were gonna leave other things similar to what we have them and put this into the mix, what kind of impact do you think that would be?
well, so towards later in the other slides, I'm going to show some combo scenarios
Okay.
so you can
All
see
right.
that.
All right.
Yeah, no,
Thanks.
that's okay. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Walter?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes. Kathleen, I believe I just heard you say that cutting the mill levy would have a negative impact on jail operations.
But cutting it by 2, because then we're down into negative cash. Yeah, two
So-
mills instead of 1.
Say operations. Is this just a revenue analysis? Or are you also adjusting expenses as a part of this presentation?
No, the expenses are not touched at all in this. It's all revenue. Yeah.
So explain how jail operations are negatively affected.
Well, so since half of the 40, yeah, roughly half of the county general fund total expenditures are for the jail operations. If you run into a negative cash position here, which is not statutorily allowed, we would have to cut expenses, and it's likely that, for example, the jail would probably feel that impact given the fact they're half the operations of the county. And we're not saying that the jail would be cut if we did this. It was just an example because the jail is one of the largest departments in the county. That's all. It's just an example.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, but this is a scenario if you cut it by 2 mills in this current budget year. Okay. Now, if we were to, embark on a kind of a modest mill reduction program in the county, one opportunity would be to reduce the mill 1/2 every other year starting this year. And by doing that, then the fund balance looks like this. And so you end, for example, 2027, in the baseline, it was $23 million in fund balance, but in this scenario, it's $13 million. And we do dip below the 17% target during, especially in years 22 through 26, but then we start building back up. So, okay. Now, keep in mind, this is with the lower CPI and the lower investment income. So
Kathleen, to be clear, when you
Yes.
say based upon the 2.2% increase on the CPI, So again, if it were in fact, so I was reading today that they are looking at changing the target inflation rate to 3%, perhaps at the Federal Reserve. So if it did go to 3% annually, these numbers would again put us in more difficult position. Am I clear about that?
No, actually, it would actually have a positive effect because we would start earning approximately $1 to $1.5 million more per year in interest income. And most of the interest income is deposited in the county. So yet on the other hand, we would likely have to also consider a 3% increase for salaries in some of the out years, farther out than 2024. That's a possibility. So there's a lot of kind of variables to that. But the reason I left the baseline at that 2.2% is because that's what the baseline was when I presented last week. So in the coming slides, I'm going to show you what some of this looks like in combination, including an increase in inflation, which has some impact on expenditures, but it also impacts revenues in a positive way because it not only grows investment income, but it also likely will impact sales tax. It probably will increase the amount of sales tax revenue we collect as well. Okay. So moving on to the city, and then if we can get through the city and then some of the debt ones, then I can take you to the combo scenarios, and then you can see some of your questions answered. The city general fund is, again, it's 100, here's all the programs offered by the departments in the city general fund. It's 162 million proposed for 2022. A third of it is dedicated for the police department, another third for the fire department. Then Public Works receives 11%, the Neighborhood Resource Center, 3.7%, Parks and Recreation, 3.6%, Technology, 3.4%, Transit, 3%. And then all the others kind of are lower than that, all right? So the baseline for the city general fund is not looking as good as the county. So the 6 mil decrease that took place in between 17 and 19, which in fact it amounts to about $6 million annually. It really inhibits the general fund from being able to withstand any kind of mill reduction without substantially impacting services. So in this instance, if we were to reduce the city mill by just one in the budget year 2022, it would drive fund balance down into negative cash position or negative fund balance. So if we were to instead of changing the mill, we were to adjust the Board of Public Utilities payment in lieu of taxes, which is what that stands for, BPU pilot. If we were to drop the pilot beginning in 22 from 11.9 of BPU gross revenues to 11.5%, which is a very modest reduction, then this would be the impact on the city general fund because all those revenues are deposited in the city general fund. And the BPU pilot amounts to roughly $35 million in total. So this would be, I think it's $1.5 million or so dollars, this 0.4, and it would be $1.5 million every year. So it would it drops down the fund balance. That modest reduction in pilot results, I looked it up and I figured out that it results in a $7 increase or decrease for residential and $60 decrease for commercial.
And that's annually?
Yes, annually.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes. So the residential, it's assuming you have a $40 bill. So So on the city debt fund, again, this is an interesting chart. I'm not sure we've looked at it this way before. This is where all the governmental debt and enterprise fund debt is, debt services paid. And so in 2022, the total expenditures of the city debt fund are proposed to be $37 million. And the green here is all of the debt related to the unified government's kind of governmental funds. So the roads, the fire stations, et cetera, all that. This light gray area is with respect to the sewer fund. And then this little darker gray area is stormwater. So in the governmental debt, 49% of the total costs are paid to pay off principal on governmental debt, and 24% of it is paid for interest. So that's 18 million for principal and 9 million for interest every year. For sewer, which the sewer fund makes a transfer into this fund to cover these costs, which are 4.7% for principal and 3% for interest for the sewer, and then also for storm. Okay. So on the city debt fund, what we know exactly what these costs are for the city debt fund, because it's based on, outstanding obligations plus the amount of debt that we have proposed in the CMIP to be issued for debt. And so we know exactly what these costs are. And the only variable may be how much in property tax the assessed value will grow by. But as I mentioned before, we have it growing by 5% to the base plus the IRB increase that allows for the total increase of 6.5% on average over the period. And what we've found is that there is an opportunity to reduce the 2 mills, in 25 and then another 2 mills in 27. And by doing that, it drops the fund balance down to these levels. Now, I have kept the scale the same here. So it's still 60, and this one's 60, just so you can see the slope properly, right? This fund does not require to have an operating reserve because it is a fund that where we know exactly what the expenditures are going to be. And so anyway, it is pretty low during 22 and 23. But I haven't factored in the fact that we will likely be refinancing debt, and there's likely to be some great opportunities next year to do that, which means that this fund balance will grow or end up higher than this. So in other words, you've often talked about, well, what if we took how many mills do we have in the debt if we were to be disciplined and keep our debt financed governmental expenses down to a disciplined level, roughly 22 million a year is what I'm projecting. If you take 15 million%, about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, there was kind of a general policy that we were not to issue debt any more than 15 million a year. And since that was about 4 or 5 years ago, if you apply inflation to it all the way out to 2027, that 15 million is actually around 22 million. So, just to keep conservative, but not issue too much debt, what I've projected is 22 million in new government debt after the CMIP sheets end, which is in 2026. See, so in 2027, we've just plugged 22 million in general, and so by doing that, you can see that, we're still able to transfer or shift 2 mills in 25 and 2 mills in 27 to the city general fund, or whatever fund you wish, actually. But what in the proposal that I've, the scenario that you'll see later, I have this shift going into the city general fund in order to augment our cash funded capital. So you'll see that in a little bit. Okay. All right, so the county general fund or the county debt fund, 3 million or almost 4 million of it is to pay principal, and 2 million of it is in interest. And a big portion of the 6 million total, roughly 1.7 million of the total, is for debt service on the new juvenile center. It's also paying for a number of other jail improvements, as well as radio projects. So there's a variety of projects in there, but it's just much smaller debt service fund. And this fund can basically only pay for public facilities. By state statute, it's not allowed to pay for other infrastructure like roads, and the county doesn't oversee road maintenance. So this is basically for county facilities and buildings. And so what we have included in the baseline is not only what's in the CMIP, but we've also identified that there was sufficient revenue coming into this fund to cover the debt service for $15 million improvement to the jail. That's a deferred maintenance to the jail that the Amoresco study identified. And we've plugged it into this forecast baseline to show that we could support those costs for that project if we debt financed it. So this includes not only what's showing in the CMIP, but also the addition of $15 million investment in our jail in order to keep it compliant with the Department of Justice. So over here, if we were to reduce the county debt fund by 1 mil, boy, it would just wipe it out. And that's because this debt, as I mentioned, this debt fund's pretty small, and it only receives 2 mils. So by cutting it by 1 mil, you've reduced it by half, and that's just not sustainable. In the out years, we're projecting that after the CMIP sheets drop off, we're projecting 5 million a year in additional county building improvements. So it includes some future capital investment, but with this 1 mil drop, it really does wipe it out. Now, so there's really not an opportunity to, there may be some very small millage reduction in the future that can be done, certainly in these out years, but this is just an example of how sensitive this debt service fund is. So now I wanted to just, this is where the combos start. So the financial planning scenarios, all right? So these are all adjustments to the base forecast, and it's a combination of a variety of those things. So in this scenario, for the first one, it includes the higher CPI, which is 3% through 2024. And then I have it at 2% in 2025 and then 1.4 after that. So I have salary increases all the way to 24 at 3%. I have a county mill drop of 1/2 beginning in 2025 and dropping by 1/2 every other year. And that results in a tax reduction of $11.50 per year if you own a home of $200,000, and $63 a year if you own a business valued at $500,000. And then I also have the city debt mill shift to the city general fund. So 2 mills at 25, 2 mills in 2027, and the corresponding 1.25 million, well, it would be about $2.5 million increase to the city general fund cash capital line for 25, and then again in 27. So, okay. So with those scenarios, then you can see that this is the combined baseline, and this is the combined scenario 1. And by doing that, you can see that the CPI adjustments and the salary increase through 2024, along with the modest county mill reduction program, it does drop our fund balances below the 17% level between 24 and 27, but then it picks back up after that. Okay. And then, of course, we don't want to just look at the combined scenario. We also want to see how it impacts each of the individual funds, right? So that's what this is. So this side, on the city general fund side, you can see that the increase in salaries and the increase in investment income and increase in revenue, and then as well as you don't really see an increase in expenditures because it increases. There's an increase in 25 and 27 from the debt mill shift, but then there's a corresponding expenditure increase. So it has no impact on the out year fund balance. On the general fund side, or the county general fund side, you can see that modest $500,000 increase every 2 years, and as well as the addition of investment income coming in. So the fund balances are below the 17% suggested reserve level, but does come back in year 2027. So this isn't as low as the original baseline number, this dip here. Okay, so again, looking at that, here's the combined, how it looks. And then individually, each fund, this is how it looks. Okay. Now, the second scenario, second and last scenario, is to have CPI through 2024, but only have salaries increasing by 3% in 2023. So we have salaries set at 2% beginning in 2024 going forward. And that by reducing that increase in salaries in that year, then we incorporated a drop in the pilot of from 11.9 to 11.5% of VPU gross revenues. And so we've included that. We've left in the progressive $500,000 drop in every other year for the county, and we've left in the debt mill shift in the out years. And the combination of those, here's the baseline, here's the revised with the scenario for scenario 2. And you can see that by incorporating that, it looks very similar to scenario 1, except it's just slightly different because of those adjustments. And
Catherine, we have a
yes.
question from Commissioner McKiernan.
Yes, thank you.
No, there's no question. I was going to wait until she was finished.
Yeah, I can't see if someone has their hand raised, so let me know. All right, so scenario 2, again, broken out by city and county. And you can see that the county's fund balances grow quite a bit, and that's because we've dropped the salaries in that 1 year. And then, so anyway. But now what I've done in order to summarize all this, right, because there's a lot of assumptions, is I put together this matrix for you to follow. And so again, here's the general baseline assumptions where you've got 2.2% at CPI and 1.4% thereafter, after 2024. Salaries are set at 3% for 23-24 and 2% after that. The mill rates are all the same, right? And then in scenario 2, we have increased CPI from 2.2 to 3%, and then 2%, between 2 and 1.5 and 1.4% thereafter. And so by increasing CPI, it does increase revenue coming in for investment income and for sales tax, but it also increases expenditures in various contract services and professional services. For salaries, for scenario 1, I have salaries at 3% for 23 and 24, and then 2% after that. And then scenario 1 again has the $500,000 drop, and then the mill shift. Then scenario 2 again, it has the same CPI assumptions as scenario 1. But in scenario 2, I've only included a 3% increase for salaries in 2023 and then 2% thereafter. And then by doing that, then I dropped the BPU pilot revenue from 1.9 or 11.9 to 11.5, right? And so by just doing a general comparison of the fund balance performance under these various baseline and then 2 scenarios, what I've done is I've done an average of the combined general fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures between the years 23 and 27. And so under the baseline, that average is 14.2%. Under scenario 1, it's 13.8. And then under scenario 2, it's 13.4. So it is roughly, almost a full percentage point difference, or 0.8% between baseline and scenario 2. And then scenario 1's right in the middle. So that's all I got. I think that's all I got. Yeah, that's all I got. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
And Mayor, if I may, Doug Bach, County Administrator, as Kathleen concludes, as you can see, there are many different scenarios, and Kathleen does a great job of throwing these in here. I will just add my comments before you start to talk. She could have factored in some for increasing investment into infrastructure. These scenarios don't account for us putting any more money into infrastructure than we've already showed you moving forward with our budget. So these scenarios are all about changing the mill rate or the pilot, not investing more in the community. I would also clarify that I do not think a 2% factor going forward for inflation rate for our employees is adequate. It has put us in the position we are today. I think 3% is a bare minimum, not enough, and that's an area we should be looking at adding more if we're going to have a workforce to perform services out here in the community, and we want to keep them. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bach really started to go to the very place that I was going to make some comments. I have to give it to Kathleen. These are great scenarios. They are great food for thought. My personal opinion is they come late in the game for the 2022 budget. I think that even in 2022, we're going to still be getting our feet back under us from a cash flow perspective, from a service delivery perspective. I believe that we absolutely need to invest more in infrastructure, in the roads, the streets, the bridges, the street lights, the buildings, all of those things that our citizens use on a daily basis. We're having some great meetings about infrastructure improvement, but so far we haven't dedicated any capital to said improvement. So at this point, it's just a lot of talk that we have yet to fund. I also think that we need to finish our priority-based budgeting exercises. I think that we can find efficiencies within our operation that we have not yet found. But given the fact that these scenarios are coming late, given the fact that we are still going to spend 2022 getting our feet back under us, given the fact that we really have not considered how we're going to fund an enhanced workforce, nor how we're going to fund enhancements in our infrastructure. I have to say that I think we should start considering these scenarios right now for 2023 and beyond. But my impression is that we should stay the course in terms of the 2022 budget.
Sorry.
Commissioner Markley.
I didn't hear my name, but I think I was next, so I'll go ahead and go. I agree with everything that Brian just said. I would add, when we lowered the mill levy, those 6 mills previously, we did that as part of a strategy that had been long thought out. It had been laid out. We said, when the STAR bonds pay off, we're going to lower our mill. We decided we weren't going to do it all at once, that we were going to do it over several years. We decided we were going to do 2 mills each of those years because we wanted to make sure we were still on even footing each year going forward. I do think that's how a mill levy reduction should happen. I think it should be part of a longer term financial plan. I think we should be looking into the out years and saying, how can we do this year over year as a strategy, rather than just sort of a knee-jerk reaction of there's some extra money, a lot of which is because of ARPA, but there's some extra money and it looks like our fund balance is good. Let's lower the mill. I think it needs to be more strategic than that. And I think it needs to be longer term. I would prefer to see us look at these scenarios, lay out what we could do over several years' time, decide when the start year is going to be, when the end year is going to be, and what we're going to do in each of those years, and lay out that longer term strategy for mill levy reduction.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just mirroring all the past comments from Commissioner Markley and Commissioner McKiernan, we're literally a week from today adopting our budget, and we're now getting these type of scenarios that are going to drastically change it in some way, shape, or form. It seems that this is a pattern where at the very last minute, there's a lot of information that's dumped on us that's going to change things in a different way. And I feel personally frustrated with it because this is information that should have been brought to us months ago when we started talking about our budget and started our workshops and thinking about these scenarios. But since we're a week away, I personally could not vote or give any opinion on any of these scenarios, as I need time to think and to go over the graphs and all of the data. And a week's not enough because I'm a person that I need to think hard and a while on it. And these are scenarios and choices that are going to have impact on our community, for the better or for worse. We don't know yet. But I just ask that in going forward, especially for 2023, if we're going to do scenarios like this, they need to be brought up in the beginning of our budget process, not at the very end. Thank you.
Commissioner Walters.
Yes, thank you. A couple comments. Since this budgeting season started, I have at every opportunity suggested that we consider reducing the mill levy. And the fact that staff has not responded to that until tonight, and then commissioners are reasonably concerned about the late breaking information, is disappointing to me. I agree we should have had this information long ago, and I requested it repeatedly. Secondly, as Brian McKiernan suggested, we have a lot of infrastructure expenditures, and you've all seen the amount of reserve that we have for 2022 and 2023. And it appears that we have just gotten caught flat-footed and don't have projects that we think are ready to go, even though we've had millions and millions of dollars from ARPA in our possession for months. So that's another disappointment and a shortcoming, I believe, to this budget. My observation is that it's not, I don't want to completely redo the budget, but I think if we consider a mill levy reduction and change nothing internally in the budget except reduce the reserve, that would have no impact to anything that's been presented, but it would give our tax-paying residents some relief that is always high on their.
So, hey, can I respond to Commissioner Walters? Couple of things he said.
And lastly,
oh, sorry.
I'd like to suggest that I think I heard County Administrator Box say a mill reduction is a long-term commitment. It's a one-year commitment. We are only considering 2022, and we certainly can't commit a mill levy reduction to future commissioners in 2025 or 2027. So that might be interesting to talk about, but it's not important to our deliberation. And if we do something in 2022 that causes what some people might think is a problem in 2026 or 2027, we'll have annual chances to adjust the mill levy if those financial projections are anywhere close. So I'm not convinced by anything I've heard tonight that we should not consider a mill levy reduction. Thank you.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you, Mayor. I know that earlier in the presentation, we had a reference to, the conversation starting in October and November of last year, and that's certainly true, but that was a much different time, especially in our analysis of where we would be financially. So tonight's information that Kathleen has brought us is the result of the mayor telling us 2 meetings ago to please send him our questions. And I submitted these questions, as perhaps others of you did also, but I specifically asked, could we see the impact of a 1 mil reduction on the county side? And could we see the impact of a 0.5% off of the pilot? And that is why Kathleen has put it together. Tonight is the night that these questions we were to submit to the mayor were to be addressed. So I've been asking for a mill levy reduction for a number of years also. And I really appreciate the well thought out explanation and presentation that she's brought. Like Commissioner Walters, I think it's worthy of more consideration. And I guess I will go on record, if it is not the consensus of our body in this budget cycle, to pursue reductions in any of these levels, then I'll just go on record right now as stating that I'm asking the governing body for 23, 24, 25, and other years coming for serious, deliberative, strategic conversations about tax relief. And the only way we can provide that are with these tools that Kathleen has given us: the mill levy, the pilot. The other portions of how taxes are collected are out of our hands. So I'll just state for the record that if we don't come to a consensus among us for the budget cycle we're in, then I'm just stating early for the next one that I'm asking us to seriously consider beginning to bring some level of tax relief to this community. Thanks.
Commissioner.
Mayor, you cut out. I'm assuming you said Commissioner Burrough.
I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Burrows, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I really don't know where to start. I want to thank Commissioner Walters for being so bold in his comments. I really know it is difficult to be on opposite sides of issues when there is a majority in an uphill battle when we start talking about funding the government for our community. But I've been around this a while. In my experience, I've seen budgets presented in a manner that always identify those things that we hold dear as being cut and hurt and damaged because of reduction in funds. Those aren't our priorities. Those are priorities that are presented by those presenting the budget. Now, are they realistic? You take a 1 mil cut, which we've been advised it's about $1 million across the board, a little over $1 million, $1.7 million. I'm going to be generous, say $1.7 million. $1.7 million spread across the entire county and is less than a 0.002% cut in any budget anywhere. And to call out the jail or to call out employee wages is one of those issues that pull at people's heartstrings and say, we can't do that. I don't want to be on record of stating that I want to cut something because these are the things that have been targeted. So in my experience in budgets, those are the kind of things that pique your interest. But what I want to talk about is our projected budget for 2022. Is our ending balance inclusive, the 17% ending balance that you talked about, Kathleen, is it inclusive of the funds that we have in possession today of the federal ARPA money?
Well, it only includes the revenue replacement portion.
That was
The
20,
rest-
if I remember correctly, it's 24 million. Was that correct?
Well, I don't remember offhand, but in total, over the 2 years and for all the funds, I don't remember offhand, something like that. Yeah,
A little over 30, I think.
Yeah,
I think,
it's just below 30. Yeah, and I appreciate what I'm trying to do is talk about, we've built our reserve inclusive of the ARPA money. So we can either call that a cushion or we can call that a taking, however you want to look at it. But it goes back to Commissioner Walters's point that we have this money sitting there and we're not putting it into action. And to generate additional revenue in the community by putting people to work and getting that money out into the community, we're sitting on it. Since I have been on the commission, I have seen our valuations rise considerably. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, but we haven't reduced the mill in correlation to the increase in valuation. And we have been told every year since I have been here, prior to the budget coming out, we are broke, we have no money, and we can't do anything. Well, I'm here to tell you, we are setting cash with some extra cash, and that's not why I'm projecting cutting the budget. That scenario was what brought up at the request of 2 or 3 commissioners. And Kathleen, I appreciate all your work in it. And this is not not because there's more cash in there, and it's not because it's a knee-jerk reaction. There are some of us that have looked at the budget over the years and seen a continued growth in our revenue, but we are still not addressing the mill rate that is causing the property tax increase. And that is just not fair to our constituents. Now, I can get into a number of questions about what is our projected budget for 2022 without the ARPA funds in it. What was it? What was our mill rate and what was our budget in 97 when the unified government consolidated? And then here we are today with over a $400 million budget. And so you have to ask yourself, what happened to the $150 million of growth in those 20 years? Where have we seen the enhancement in our community? And I'm not saying there hasn't been, I'm just stating these are the questions that I'm getting from constituents that say, why aren't we seeing this money that has come in through increased valuations in our community? And to promise moving forward that we're going to cut mill rates, I agree with Commissioner Walters. Every year's a new year. We will go through this budget again. We do it every year in the state. Projections are just that. They're projections, and things change. And I am absolutely supportive of a mill reduction in both the county and the city. Our budget can absorb it. And to call out 2 or 3 scenarios that it's going to cost our jail and it's going to cost our employees' wages, I think was unfortunate that they were called out as those 2 items that would not be considered if we chose not to do if we chose to do the mill reductions. I stand by. I support Commissioner Walters' position on the mill levy reduction. I just wish we would give stronger consideration to how we can address the pilot. We've got a pilot increase, I believe, is going to bring 1.5 more in this year, but yet the proposal was only a 0.04% cut, if I remember, Kathleen. But
well, yes, I have a scenario in there for 0.4. Yeah, but actually the pilot's going to be flat or less than it was last year because industrial and commercial growth has really not resumed. So That's based on what I've talked with Lori Austin, the CFO at the BPU. So, but
Well,
It-
it's,
yeah.
I appreciate the commission patience with me this evening. I've made it clear where I stand in my thoughts, and I want to thank Commissioner Walter for his brevity and sticking to his guns and calling for a mill reduction. He's called for a mill reduction the last couple of years. I know he's been a budget hawk working on this, and having him be part of the finance committee has been a pleasure to get to work with someone that's dedicated to doing what his constituents are asking us to do, specifically when we have the opportunity to do it, not 1 year, 2 years, but 2 or 3 years back. And so that's where I stand. And thank you, Mayor, for your patience.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Townsend, District 1. I tend to agree more with Commissioner McKiernan and Markley in that this body is the only entity that is charged with supplying major services like infrastructure, like public service to our constituents. And I believe that until we identify from this budget or ones in the future, money to deal with those basic services, only after then, if we have money sitting around, let's start funneling it toward those basic needs that our citizens have already told us we want before we actually go and cut the meal rate. Because I get what Commissioner Walters and Commissioner Burrough want. And I would want it too, to see our constituents write out a smaller check when it comes to paying taxes. But we have seen in the past where this commission has decreased the mill levy, but it did not result in an overall decrease to our constituents of the check that they actually wrote to us. And that was a combination of the increase in valuation of properties and the fact that we are not the only taxing entity. So I agree with where Commissioner Walters and Burrough want to go, but I'm saying as the only entity that can fix roads, streets, bridges, provide lighting, public safety, we need to address those issues first so we don't have to go back and tell our constituents we didn't provide those services at the level that you called for. And even though we reduced the mill levy, you still wrote the same amount of money in your check for taxes or more. I do appreciate the presentation that was made tonight, whenever it came. So thank you for those opportunity to comment.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Harold Johnson, District 4. I hesitated to speak to this matter, but I just feel like I have to. First of all, Kathleen, thank you for this presentation. Thank you, Commissioner Bynum, for requesting to see what those circumstances, scenarios rather, would look like. We have had this conversation about lowering mill levies and leveraging that against the increased property values. And yes, both need to happen. But the thing that I have been requesting for years seems to just continue to fall upon deaf ears. And I'm not sure if that's because it's not a realistic request or expectation. But that simply is that we are the main entity, and it kind of segues off of what Commissioner Townsend talked about. We're the main entity that is asked, that is demanded to bring about lower taxes, to lower the mill levy, and yet none of the other taxing agencies are feeling the same kind of pressure. And I've asked for us to have some kind of discussion over the course of years with the other taxing agencies to have a pragmatic discussion about the mill levy, how it impacts each one of our jurisdictions, and then how we can collectively look at mill rate reductions and tax rate reductions to our overall constituents. We are all in this together, and the mill rate reductions that we have made in the past, again, everybody knows this on this call. 46% of one mill comes from city county. So what about the other 54% that make up the greater part of one mill? That comes from the other tax. And I'm not here to suggest what they do. I'm just saying we need to have a strategic, pragmatic conversation. And until we do so, I think we're going to be continuing having these kind of problems in the future. So I'm going to continue to make that request, and whether or not anybody hears and thinks it's relevant or not, I think that it's definitely needs to be had, and the sooner the better. So thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I want to address, several things. I think what we have to look at is, when we saw that first chart that was presented, the comparison to other areas, we are at a disadvantage because our median household valuation is much lower. And in fact, I understand that the Overland Park, for instance, 1/3 of all their general revenues comes from Oak Park Mall. That's a significant advantage that Overland Park has and has had over the years. The other thing that we are dealing with, and it's been mentioned by Commissioners Markley and McKiernan and Ramirez, is that our infrastructure is much older, and based upon the nature of how our city grew, that we continue to annex more and more areas. We adopted a lot of township infrastructure that we did not require in the Shawnee Township, that when developers built, that they would add sidewalks, that they would add storm sewers or sanitary sewers. And so where I live, for instance, the sanitary sewer begins 2 blocks north. It begins again 2 blocks south. There are sanitary sewers 2 blocks east and 2 blocks west. But my area, my neighborhood, we're not going to get sanitary sewers because the city doesn't have the funds to come in and even help us along with that. When I talk to constituents, I hear consistently questions, and people will call and say, why isn't Key Lane fixed? Why aren't the curbs in our neighborhoods fixed? Why don't I have storm sewers? Those are the questions that I get consistently, and I have to answer them honestly because we don't have the funding. And so it's 59% of our budget, again, goes to public safety. There is no constituent out there who is asking us to cut drastically the police coverage or the fire coverage. In fact, what we hear consistently is, let's fund up more of that. So this is the situation we're in. And I recommend, I like Commissioner Markley's suggestion, this is a long-term strategic move. Because of the decline and the blight over the decades in Wyandotte County, the value of the decline in property valuation meant that for us to collect the same amount of money we collected from the prior year, mill levies had to go up because the valuations were smaller. Now that we are growing in the past 20 years, our property valuations are going, our assessed valuation total aggregate and individual are increasing. That's going to continue to provide us room for continuous mill reductions, and which is again why we have to continue to bring in economic development that works for us and that is going to bring more people in who are going to continue to build new housing, rehab old housing, raise those property values, and spread that tax burden around. The thing that's discouraging, frankly, is I've asked some folks this when they tell me that they really, and I understand, I want tax reductions too. That I said, well, let me ask you, what amount of money would you notice on a reduction of taxes? And what would that be? Well, they don't really often have an answer, but it's got to be at least several $100s for them to notice it. If you have a $500,000 home and you do a 1 mil reduction on that home, that is about $57 a year. So on a mortgage of $500,000, what is it, a $5 a month reduction in my property tax bill is not going to change it, but that kind of reduction in the money, the revenues we generate does mean, for instance, 10 miles of road. We saw that, a 1 mil reduction pays for 10 miles of road. And those are the complaints I get. I get complaint about code enforcement. They're overworked. They don't have enough people out there. I hear complaints about traffic patrol. We don't have enough traffic patrol. I hear complaints about broken curbs. I hear complaints about stormwater. I hear complaints about any number of infrastructure issues, just the basic services that people want. And what I hear more and more from people is, I am willing to pay for better service. What's hard is, even with our tax level at what it is, we're still not able to provide the level of service we need. It's a long-term play. It's taken us a long time to get into this situation. It's taking us a long time to come out of it. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to back up and second what Commissioner Johnson mentioned. Since I've been on the commission, I've at least heard once from Commissioner Johnson, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Bynum, asking that we work with the other taxing jurisdictions in this county to ensure we have a strategic way forward. We may be reducing our levy and reducing our taxes, but what about the library? What about the school? That's where the majority of all their tax dollars go, is there. We get only a portion of it. But again, the answer that we've been given is, well, they have their own governing body. You need to go talk to them. It's our responsibility, I believe, as a governing body of the county and city to work with our other taxing jurisdictions and making sure that when one entity is trying to make a strategic move of lowering taxing, talk with the other taxing jurisdictions. Let the governing bodies talk. Let us have the conversation together. Yes, I know you, Mr. Mayor, may speak with the superintendent of the schools or maybe speaking with the library, but what about us as the governing body? We need to have those conversations as well. Not individually with individual school board members, but as a collective, because that's what we are. We're a collective. And so I just wanted to back up what Commissioner Johnson said, and I think it's something that we really do need to have.
Commissioner Philbrook.
I believe Tom Burrows had his hand up before mine.
Okay, well, you're first in line. I'm not sure.
All right, that's okay. So I am going along with the concept with Harold Johnson and with also with Christian, and that is that I know that Melissa Bynum, since she's been elected, has been asking for that conversation among, and I think it's up to us as commissioners to put out that olive branch and ask for transparency and ask them to come to the table, because they're elected officials too, and we all come to the table and we have that conversation of transparency in front of everybody. And so if we don't do that, then yes, we are hiding behind closed doors. And that is true. So I agree with that, and I wholeheartedly go for that, because it is all of us that are representing our community. And thanks, Christian, for saying that, and thank you definitely for Commissioner Bynum for pushing for this for a long time. And I agree with that. I also agree with Commissioner Brian McKiernan and Angela Markley, and those that believe that we need to finish this work of infrastructure restructuring and figure out how we're going to do that before we start throwing pennies at people and small amount of dollars, because yes, when I'm not making much money, $5 does matter. But when you multiply $5 by a whole bunch of people, that helps pay for some of the things that they're wanting. And what I hear about are roads and codes, roads and codes. And that's what I hear a lot about. And the only other thing that, that I hear about, then you can add parks. And so those are the three highest things that I hear about. They want roads to be good. They want people coded, so they're supposed to be doing their job, and not tearing down their community. And then, and then of course, parks, so they feel safe going out and enjoying the parks with their families. And those are the three high priorities that I hear about all the time. Thank you.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. And, the comments that were made by Commissioner Johnson, I remember my very first year as a commissioner, we were in a meeting and I had asked that we send a letter requesting other entities to hold the line until we could have a meeting. And I remember the discussion that occurred about that and the way it was handled. And so there have been many of us that have called for that. And so if everybody's really adamant about doing that, why hasn't it been done? I guess that's just my comment. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is, if we're going to continue to collectively work on this PBB, we've had all year long with the commitment of PBB bringing reductions. And here we are in the 11th hour, as it was stated earlier, about the impact that these mill reductions would have. I go back to my original statement, the statement made by Commissioner Walters, that this budget can't absorb it. I believe last year's budget could have absorbed it, but anytime we get new revenue, we spend it, and we spend it on giveaways to large corporations, and our property owners want relief. I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm hearing it, much like many of you. And we must not lose sight that if you want to continue to grow this community, you can't push people out with increased property taxation.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of concerns, and one of them is we're still in a pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 months, 12 months. And I have serious concerns about that. I also have serious concerns about our employees getting raises, because a lot of people are leaving us. 3% is not enough. And this is late in the game to get this information that we're supposed to make in a week. And I agree with Commissioner Bynum that we're kind of stuck right now, but we need to start January 1 trying to figure out how to lower the mill levy, and not come up a week before we're supposed to do it and say, hey, oh, by the way, if you do this, then this is what's going to happen. We have to do a better job of planning what we're going to do further out than what we're doing it. And this last minute surge is frustrating for me, because I'm like, why weren't we told that before? And as far as talking to the other taxing entities, I'm okay with that, but I am in contact with some of the school members, board members already. And I think that that's something that we should do collectively. Have everyone come in, sit down, and not point fingers, but figure out what each one can do to help the other one. You know, I know that some of the schools are going to be looking for some school bond stuff. You know, so you threw a lot at us today, and I don't think we can, it's palatable between now and next week. So I caution us to lowering it right now and start in January to figure out what we can do for next year.
All right. Thank you. Very good discussion. And we will pick this up again next week.
Mayor, thank you. I appreciate all the comments. I would like to at least respond. We know we've been working through the budget through the course of this year. I believe I've heard, and I believe I hear it with the numbers of people in discussion, the direction we were given in building the budget was to work within the money we have to work toward building infrastructure and staffing and find ways to find some increases in pay for our staffing. Discussion, the direction was not given to me, and I will to reduce the mill rate. You asked for scenarios to look at that coming into it. That's why we provided this information. As has been said, it's late in the game. It's information we can provide anytime the commission wants to dig into it, but we didn't bring it forward tonight from a standpoint of thinking, okay, here, let's throw this out at you. It was a request to come. But our earlier direction, I think, is consistent with what I've heard from the majority of the commissioners tonight on the where we're investing, trying to invest back in the community with the budget. And I appreciate the last comments made by Commissioner Kane about investing in our employees, because this is just barely putting much more to them. And I have several unions that are out of contract at this point and all looking for additional money. So those are areas that come to it, and employees get thrown out there because they are 70% of our budget. So it's hard to talk about our overall revenue and costs without thinking of where we spend 70% of our money. I would also say that we can provide to the commission, and your decision of how you decide you want to meet with them or whatever, we can put together some 10-year charts on each of the taxing jurisdictions and show what they've done over the last decade in terms of their mill rates. I think that gives you a little bit of information and working toward that. And that could, I think, could be strong information for you all to look at.
Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. I really appreciate your comments. And I would reiterate that what Kathleen brought was a direct response to questions I emailed. And I also would really like to see the chart that you suggest could be created with the, maybe 10 years of mill levy rates from the taxing jurisdictions. I recognize how unwieldy the concept is of bringing all the taxing entities together. For one thing, it would obviously be an open public meeting. My suggestion would be that it be a facilitated public meeting with a neutral third party. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I know Commissioner Johnson has too, because we've talked about it so many times. But, perhaps if there were a small subcommittee created on how exactly to go about holding such a meeting, I would also suggest that it's probably more than one meeting. It's probably a series of meetings, but nonetheless, I appreciate Commissioner Johnson ringing that bell yet one more time. Maybe we can take some steps toward convening that group in a very thoughtful way. Thanks so much.
All right, that concludes our meeting for the evening. We are adjourned.
Mayor,
Yep.
Mayor?
Yes.
Before you adjourn, could I throw one thing out there as we look ahead to the calendar? So, Kathleen, so the last item is just we do have our exceeding revenue neutral public hearing on Tuesday, which is a required action. There is one other item I have that I believe is there for a yellow sheet that we didn't take action on, and I just would like to know, because there were several commissioners spoke to it, but I don't know that we really worked it around the room to say. So as far as building a yellow sheet and changes to this year's budget, we have the sheriff's office investigator position that we've heard. Also, Commissioner Kane had raised the issue of moving $250,000 from the Parks Operating Fund, basically, I believe, from what we would have in the fund balance to a modified park on Hutton Road by the new fire station out in that area. So I need to know whether that's something probably from a straw poll perspective that we want to build into the yellow sheet or if there's or not.
I see. But I would ask for a straw poll to approve the $250,000 transfer from general fund into specific reserve for moving on the Piper Park. Is that sufficient?
Yes, that's what I'm looking to understand.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Dykler, roll call, please.
Thank you. Ramirez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Philbrook,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners. I really appreciate that.
Was that it, Mr. Bach?
Mayor, unless I'm missing anything, those were the only two items that we will build a yellow sheet. We'll show you the plus, the minuses, how those will work. And we will provide that with you as you have the information for the revenue neutral rate public hearing, budget hearing. Otherwise, we don't have any topics for any type of workshop to follow that hearing.
All right. All right, very good. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.